The cards you're dealt. All right, Stephen. Deep breaths. Now, we're going to choose the ones that call out to you. I spoke in a calm voice. I could tell that he was way out of his depth, and I was doing my best to make it easier for him. Even still, his breathing was rapid as his hand hovered over the tarot deck. I winced a little as his fingers rested on the first card, already knowing what it was. His second card wasn't any better, or the third. I collected the rest of the deck and arranged the ones he had chosen in a neat row, mentally preparing myself for the task ahead of me. So, I'm not the most conventional psychic. I turned the first card over for him, watching his eyes grow wide as the devil was revealed. And these cards aren't meant to be taken literally, in most cases. I paused to turn the next card over. The Ten of Swords glared back at us. The bleak image always made my skin crawl. However, you're a special case, I finished, letting him take in the imagery for a few moments before I turned the final card over. Stephen whimpered loudly as death stared back at him. I'd known how this reading would go from the moment I was drawn to his home. I'd gone through each room while I waited for him to arrive, learning all I needed to know. Stephen kept everything he owned so perfectly arranged and precise. Here was a man so meticulously boring, so calculatedly ordinary, a man who was careful not to draw attention to himself. I placed his severed hand on the table beside the cards and walked to the mantel, where the only out-of-place item in Stephen's home was resting. I brought the necklace over to him and held it in front of his face. Tell me about Madeline, I rasped, watching him squirm against his restraints. Tell me, or I can get the saw back out, I repeated, gesturing to his remaining hand. I retrieved a photograph of Madeline from my briefcase. The necklace around her neck was the same one dangling in front of his fearful eyes. You killed her, didn't you? I persisted. Stephen looked at me in defeat, finally finding his voice. Yes, he gasped between staggered breaths. I nodded, finally getting the confession I needed. All right, Stephen. That just about wraps up our session. I began collecting my belongings, placing the necklace and Stephen's hand into plastic bags as evidence from Madeline's parents, proof that I had found her killer. I had one last task to perform, as per their request. I doused the home in gasoline and stepped out into the night. It was definitely time for a cigarette. Later, Stephen, I called, flicking the butt into the doorway. I watched the flames engulf the house in my rear view, satisfied. Sometimes, being psychic almost makes bounty hunting too easy. My son wanted to go trick-or-treating a week after Halloween. This afternoon, as I was eating my lunch, I saw my son skip towards the front door. He was wearing his Halloween costume. Where do you think you're going? I'm going trick-or-treating. I just looked at him confused. Halloween's over. It was exactly a week ago. Remember? I know. That was Halloween 1. Today's Halloween 2. I was now even more confused. What makes you think today's Halloween too? In fact, there's no such thing as Halloween too. There's only one Halloween every year, just like how there's only one Christmas and Easter. My son began to pout. His lip even began quivering. Sorry, Bud. You'll have to wait till next October to celebrate Halloween again. It will be here before you know it. Also, Thanksgiving and Christmas are around the corner. You have those to look for. It is Halloween too today. I know it. I was now starting to get annoyed. My son hardly ever raises his voice like this. Excuse me? I know today is Halloween too, because I saw our neighbor put a Halloween decoration up in his backyard. I saw it through my bedroom window, and I could tell it was a Halloween decoration because it was scary looking. I figured that my son misinterpreted something he saw, so I went with him up to his room to see what he was talking about. You should see it, Dad. It was really scary. We should ask him where he bought it from, because I want one too. As we got up to my son's room, he bolted towards his window and pointed at what he saw. See? See? There it is. It's a bloody zombie lady. Can you see it? I turned pale when I saw it. It wasn't a Halloween decoration. It was my neighbor's wife, half buried in the backyard. I knew they were fighting, but I never imagined it getting to this point. After I processed what I saw, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. Don't be scared, Dad. It's not really a zombie. Sonata in Blood. Fred entered the music shop. The bell tinkled and the door swung shut, quietly, behind him. Immediately, he made a beeline straight for the piano scores. Time had not been kind to dear Fred. Wrinkles caressed his face, and there was a pair of silver glasses perched upon his nose. His hair was turning gray, too. He wanted to retire soon, and he wanted to have one last show before he did. It would be the greatest show in history. The perfect piece for that show was hidden away in the back of the sheets. But as soon as Fred's fingers caressed the paper, he knew this was it. There was something about it that sounded right. The rhythm, the articulation, the key. This was it. He took the piece of music to the cashier to pay. The cashier nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw what he picked. She scanned the price tag. Good luck, she said cryptically. Fred wondered what she meant, but then he felt the sheet in his bag like a lump of shining gold, and he felt excited as a little kid again. Later that evening, Fred sat down at his piano, the sheet nicely propped up on the stand. It was a beautiful beast, that piano. The body made out of polished ebony, and the keys made out of ivory. He warmed up with some scales. Then Fred looked lovingly at the piece of music he just bought. A sorrowful sonata just made for him and his piano. All right, my girl, he smiled to himself. Let's see what you've got. From the first note, he fell in love. The sonata was haunting, beautiful. The music danced around him and echoed throughout the house. Playing the piano made him feel more peaceful. It was to his shock, then, when Fred was suddenly dragged off of his stool in the middle of his melody and felt silver handcuffs click around his wrists. He looked up to see a grim face glaring back at him. Rubber plugging his ears. Fred trembled like a leaf, his face turning pale. What did I do wrong?" he stammered. Saying nothing, the policeman yanked him up roughly, and Frog marched him throughout the house. Fred's heart sank lower and lower as he saw more and more corpses, that of his wife, children, and servants. They stared back at him, petrified, blood pooling out of their ears and their mouths open in an eternal scream. Then Fred looked down at his hands. They were speckled with blood. "But I was playing the piano the whole time," Fred protested. "I didn't do it." The policeman shrugged. It was pretty clear who did it to him. As he led Fred towards the front door, he saw the music score. It called out to him. It knew how much he loved playing piano at home. He grabbed the music score and smiled. He couldn't wait to play it for his family. Scarecrows. Tom grunted, lifted the scarecrow off its pole, and tossed it alongside the compost pile. "They used to last a lot longer, huh?" said his daughter Brittany. She idly poked at the scarecrow's straw-stuffed shirt with the little pink princess wand she'd recently been hauling around everywhere. "They did," said Tom. "You're too young to remember, though." "I remember all the scarecrows," she said. Tom motioned to her to follow him, and together they started up the muddy trail to the pony barn. "What's the first scarecrow you remember?" he said. "The one you dressed up to look like Mommy," she said. Tom pursed his lips and nodded his head. "Yeah, you might remember that one. You were very little." "I always liked the ones you dressed up special, like the one you glued the wig onto, or the statue one," she said. "The Venus de Milo? That was a good one. Messy, though." Tom slid open the barn stall door. A weeping brown burlap sack sat huddled in the corner. "Please," said the sack. "All right. You're getting old enough to help," said Tom. "How should we decorate this one?" Residuals. An orange leaf drifted off the branch of a cottonwood tree, moved by the icy breath of an early October breeze. It flipped and twisted through an open window and fluttered like a monarch past the shoulder of the bass player in a thick white coat. Carried by the last fingers of the icy breeze and swept by the soft melodies of the band, the leaf landed at the foot of Clayton Martin, and he cast his dark brown eyes at it. The top half of his face was covered by a narrow mask, but his trim figure was easily recognizable in his lightweight tuxedo. He bent down and picked up the orange leaf, held it loosely in his fingers. The lead singer, in a deep Frank Sinatra-type tone of voice, began the next song. "It's a marvelous night for a moon dance," the words of the singer said, as some sort of strange breeze caught the leaf and flung it from Clayton's fingers towards a dazzling young woman in a sparkling black dress. A fantabulous night to make romance 'neath the cover of October skies. The orange leaf drifted towards the woman, the glistening glow of her green eyes hidden behind half of a mask as well. Her long dark hair hung loosely at the flanks of her narrow face, and she caught Clayton's gaze and smiled so warmly towards him as the leaf passed her by. And all the night's magic seems to whisper and hush, and all the soft moonlight seems to shine in your blush, the singer sang. There was a natural pull, like gravity, between them. Without a word, Clayton outstretched his arm and held his hand open towards her. Her red lips curved into a beautiful smile, and she seemed to glide across the room towards him. Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love? Sang the singer, as a woman's slender hand fell into his, her glove so soft and gentle in his palm. Can I just make some more romance with you, my love? Swirling masses twirled around the brightly lit room, like innocent shadows struck by the pale beams of a harvest moon. And I know that the time is just right, and straight into my arms you will run, sang the singer in a low tone. Clayton and the woman moved across the floor, lost in a dazzling sensation of what could be love. Their young eyes were entranced by the unwavering gaze of one another. My heart will be waiting to make sure that you're never alone. There was a sudden roar that rose high above the melodies of the band, and both Clayton and the woman turned their heads to the roof above them. A snap and crack of wooden beams, as loud as an explosion, shook the earth. Then there was nothing but horrified screams. Reginald's young eyes stared at the charred and blackened remains of the Waverley mansion. Its withering ruins were brightly illuminated by the light of a full October moon. It was a gas explosion that caused the roof to fall that night, Reagan's grandfather said. 83 people were killed. That was back in 1977. And ever since, folks been saying you can still see people dancing in the remains of the ballroom on nights like tonight. An orange leaf, pushed by the icy breath of an early October breeze, drifted past Reagan's nose like a monarch fluttering by. Have you ever seen a ghost in there, Grandpa? Reagan's grandfather smiled. Don't reckon I have, kiddo. But every so often, I think I can hear music drifting down from that old place. Thank you so much for joining me. You can also find me on Instagram at duchessof.darkness or Twitter at duchessofdark N2. Also, please send me your stories or poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. Until next time.